tell me a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Kia ora, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining, and thanks for having us. It's a real pleasure. We're real fans of the ProjectWorks product and also the employee experience that you have. So it's great to be partnering with you. My name is Kalyn, or KP. I'm the Chief Executive here at Humankind. And at Humankind, we partner with organizations across New Zealand to design and deliver employee experiences that really help their employees thrive and help organizations to perform. And I'll pass over to my colleague, Charlie.
Yeah, so hi everyone, Charlie Hughes. I'm an Associate Director at Humankind. I've been with the team for about 4 years and have been lucky enough to be part of our employee experience journey and enhancing how we interact and support clients from an employee experience perspective. So really looking forward to today's conversation. Really looking forward to any of the questions that you have. Shoot all of the difficult ones at KP would be great. But yeah, looking forward to getting into it. Thanks for having us.
Cool, fantastic. So I guess we'll just jump into our first question for you then. Right, okay. With trends like the Great Migration and quiet quitting, what do you recommend for addressing retention challenges?
I can take this one.
Yeah.
So there's many things. The overall message that we have here is talk to your people and listen to your people. One of the beliefs that really guides our work at Humankind is that the answers lie within the population that you're serving. And so practically, this can look like host an all-hands meeting, go for coffee with your team, host stay interviews or have stay interviews done. So instead of exit interviews, instead of waiting until someone's already gone to hear what they thought and what their experience was like, what about doing that proactively? And that's something that we do with a number of the organizations that we work with. Sit down and talk to your people while they're still there and figure out what's really working well, what areas need to be improved, et cetera. The other way that we partner with clients to do this is through a full-blown employee experience discovery. So that's providing objective, deep insights into what it's like to work in your organization. So there we look across the full EX, we call it, employee experience. And so there we look at purpose experiences. Do employees have the opportunity to connect to the purpose, the values, bigger picture? Relationship experiences, we know that a sense of connection and belonging is an innate human need that drives everyone, and more employees are really looking to their workplace to provide that. Enabling experiences and also performance experiences. So do people have the chance to grow, evolve, perform? Are they clear on that? And how is that working for the organization as well? So the key message there is talk to your people. Where are they at? What do they need? A couple of specific points within that are really topical right now that many of you will have seen in the media, but we're certainly seeing in our data is more than ever, employees do want that sense of purpose. They want to be a part of something that they really believe in. And they really want to work in a workplace where they have aligned values and they really see themselves as part of that community. So whether the actual organization and the mission of that organization provides that purpose, or if we see many organizations do things like provide opportunities to work in the community or volunteer days, really that connection to purpose is a real driving force. And we're really seeing that shift in the market. The other thing to really note there around retention is flexibility. Some form of flexibility has really become table stakes in many industries, especially knowledge work like professional services. And so it's really important to note that flexibility doesn't mean just employees being able to work from home whenever they want. There's a full spectrum when we talk about flexibility, starting at almost fully in office to fully remote or digital first, and then everything in between. And again, the data that is coming out from the US, other countries, and that we're seeing is that in many knowledge working environments, hybrid is a great option. The key there is that it needs to be really deliberately designed, right? Thinking about your operating model, what you're optimizing for, which will include your ability to deliver on your mission, execute on your strategy, and also provide flexibility while getting a sense of, culture and connectedness and all of those things. So overall, like really it's listen to your people, really think about purpose and how we're connecting our team's work to that purpose. And then everyone really needs to be thinking about flexibility right now.
Yeah.
And I think just in addition to that, KP, is once you've heard from your people around what's important to them, why they stay, why they're connected to your organisation, it's how you communicate that to the market, both to prospective employees, but also those employees currently with you. So what's the narrative? What's the employee brand or the employer brand that you're communicating? Would that be through your EVP, through your employee value proposition and the benefits and the culture that you have for your team, or other things that you do as an organisation that make you unique and why people should be joining and staying with you. So once you've heard, it's around creating that compelling story and narrative as to why us as an organisation and why people should stay or join you. So it's communicating that in a really concise way.
Yeah, and just adding on that a little bit, like there's some we've seen a lot of this, right, in the narrative over the last few years. We're really seeing it's following some big macroeconomic shifts that have happened. A couple of things, we've really over the last century, we've moved from a goods-based economy to a knowledge-based economy, right? And so with people really at the center of a lot of our business models, what's also happening simultaneously is that there's a bit of a demise of some of the other institutions that really gave people that sense of purpose. And so now people are looking more to their workplaces to fill that in their lives, right? So a little bit less on church, less on things like Rotary, and people are looking to their workplaces. And as Charlie said, like really communicating that and really creating that link for people on how their work contributes to that purpose. And yeah, I think, right now, like try to hire someone that's under the age of 35 if you don't have clearly articulated values or a purpose or impact or mission that they align with, and you're going to have a pretty hard time. So yeah, we just believe so strongly in the power of that, both for organizations and the meaning that it can bring to people's work.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's very insightful. Okay, let's go to the next question. With salary reviews coming up in many businesses and inflationary pressures, what are you seeing great organisations doing? What about additional benefits that are being provided?
Oh, I'm happy to take this one. So I think, firstly, it's to acknowledge that it's a really challenging environment for businesses, both with inflation pressures, but also business confidence, potentially not as robust as it has been previously, and also that uncertainty around what does this year hold, what's going to happen, and what does that look like for our organisation. So I guess it's just acknowledging, firstly, this is a really challenging environment. However, that said, I think there's some really tangible things that organisations can be doing to address, firstly, expectations around remuneration, but also communicating it in the right way. So I guess my first recommendation and plea is that as leaders, as business owners, you are thinking about, one, how you are setting very clear expectations with your people, and how are you communicating where you're at from a commercial perspective? How are you being really transparent and honest, as far as reasonably possible, of course, as to where you are financially, and what's the different factors that may be impacting your ability to provide remuneration increases or to make substantial changes that may have been normal for the last couple of years. So I think, one, it's around having really clear communication and expectation with your people around the context and environment that you're operating in. So that's really clear. I think the second thing that you can do as leaders and as business owners is thinking about what are those decision-making principles that are applied when you're making remuneration decisions. So what are those core principles and decision-making factors that are central to how you make decisions within your organisation? So when I say decision-making principles, I mean things like affordability. So where do you start in terms of, can you even afford to give remuneration pay increases this year? We're thinking about market relativity. So, are you looking at where your individuals or where your employees sit within certain bands, or how they compare to other developers who sit within other organizations? Things like performance. So is there a performance aspect to your REM reviews, and how you distribute whatever there is within the pot within your teams? And I think finally, internal relativity. So what does pay look like within your teams? And is there some consistency, fairness around how people are paid for the role that they're performing? And so those are just 4 examples of decision-making principles. And I think as organizations, we very much advocate and have seen the best examples of having really challenging conversations with organizations that have those principles really clear at the center of how they communicate with their team members. That way, people are clear in terms of, okay, those are the 3 things that have informed this amount or 0 amount, whatever it might be. And also, it's about creating those expectations and those clarity with people. And we know that REM is a highly emotive thing. And if people feel ill-informed or don't necessarily have all of the information or context around how those decisions were made, there can be angst, frustration, stress. And our kind of biggest suggestion is to front foot that and to be very clear around how those decisions are made.
Fantastic. Anything to add to that, KP?
Charlie hit the nail on the head. I think just what most people will already know, even ourselves, as we go into our own salary reviews at Humankind, I'm constantly reminded, how strategically important this process is. As Charlie said, of course, it just has such an impact on people's experiences. And, as employers, we want to provide the best experience and really recognize the people that are really working in our teams. And also as an organization, strategically, it's a real imperative, right? It can create a differentiator in how you're able to attract, engage, and retain your people, right? So if they are, as Charlie said, if it's clear, if it's transparent, that takes away a lot of that muddiness and the focus on that, which allows people to really focus on the core purpose of the organization and the mission. And also, if done well, it can also really motivate and incentivize people to be working towards the behaviors that you want.
So
fantastic.
One other point that slipped my mind was that we also recognize that not every organization can compete from a remuneration perspective. And actually, touching on your point around additional benefits, often organizations have lots of different things that are attraction and retention elements for their employees. So for those organizations, and some of you might be on the call or webinar today, if REM is an area which is going to be a real challenge or stretch for you this year, and you're not anticipating huge significant increases, one, know that you're not alone, and we are having those conversations very regularly with clients here in Aotearoa. And 2, there's a whole raft of other reasons that people stay with you. And linking back to the retention question, what's your employer brand? What are you communicating in terms of other reasons why people stay with you? Is that additional leave? Is that a flexible working environment? Is it collaborating with the best minds within your industry? So what are those other selling points, those other benefits that you can focus on in conjunction with REM?
Fantastic. That's great.
Hey, Melanie, just one point I thought I would add in for any participants. We should have a Q&A function on here. I believe I see that. So if anyone has questions or specific questions for Charlie or I, then just please fire them right in and we'd be happy to take those.
Great. That sounds good. Okay. The next question we have is, what effect does stress have on work performance, and how can you reduce employee stress?
Yeah, I'm happy to dive in with my first thoughts on this one. So I think kind of the starting point is absolutely stress has a huge impact on work performance. But before delving into kind of negative stress, I think it's really important to note that there are 2 sides of stress. There's that stress which is sustained, negative, has a detrimental impact on your mental health, your physical health. But there's also an element of kind of healthy stress, which can enable and enhance productivity. And I think for the purposes of this question, we're going to focus on that negative, sustained stress, which can have an impact on your health and mental well-being. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that at times a level of stress is really helpful and conducive to high performance and getting stuff done. In terms of negative stress, we absolutely know, and a whole raft of research and data directly correlates, I guess, negative stress with impact on performance. So things that we hear and see about have negative impact on engagement, absolutely, productivity, culture, it can breed toxic environments and general negativity from people. And also retention. Quite honestly, when people are put into environments and situations where the stress is having a negative impact on their health, we quite rightly see people resigning for their own personal protection and safety. And so I think there's many things that employers can be doing to firstly acknowledge that stress exists and to put measures in place for if that stress is sustained and unhealthy, but also do separate things to create right conversations. So a couple of things that come to mind are, one is creating a conversation about it. So I think that recognition that we all work in environments where we are absorbing huge volumes of information, of requests, of meetings, whether it be in person or in online. We're all bombarded by requests and data every day. And I think there is a huge part and obligation for employers to recognize that and to create a conversation around that with employees. And that way, kind of making it okay for people to share when actually today is a day where I'm particularly vulnerable to all of these things that are happening around me and I'm feeling not okay. And the other point is role modeling. So a colleague of mine shared a great article with us this morning around the impact and correlation that your manager has on your health and well-being in a workplace. So I think the study that we saw this morning that came from Forbes was actually 70% of participants within this particular research pool has said that their manager and their leader has the highest impact on their mental health and well-being, consistent to your partner or husband or wife, whatever it might be. So those two parties, your manager at work and your spouse or partner, have equal impact on your mental health and well-being, which is not a surprise, but also quite scary when you think about that percentage. So I think there is a huge role that we play as leaders and you play as leaders within your organizations to be role modeling the right behaviors in terms of creating those periods for pause, self-reflection, connection as a team, but also doing simple things like booking in leave, actually being on leave when you're saying you're going to be on leave, thinking about your operating rhythms and preventing emails from going out at 9 p.m. at night, and creating work cultures where you're unconsciously creating the expectation of work happening at all hours. And so role modeling is a huge part of it around setting those right behaviors, supporting your people and having those right conversations. And then the final one I think is really about, and I touched on it, is about creating that space for pause and being intentional around those moments. So at Humankind, we're really fortunate that actually we are very conscious of creating those intentional pause moments, whether it be catching up over tea, whether it be a day all together in the office, but actually noting that whilst there's 10 billion things going on around us, there is always a necessity, not just a desire, it's a necessity to create those pause moments and protecting that time and making sure that it's seen as important. And so, look, I don't think we can say that stress will go away. I think we all work in industries and in roles where that volume of information and requests that come through will continue to be there, but it's around communicating and saying, like, let's recognize that it can be particularly hard, creating those pause moments and those opportunities for people to call out help, but also role modeling and the right behaviors that we can start to make normal within your teams, and definitely top down from leaders to show that health, stress, mental health well-being are hugely important. And actually, in order to have a productive workforce, you need people to be happy and healthy at work, right? So yeah, lots of different things that can be done.
Fantastic. Anything to add to that, KP?
Maybe the only thing would be to, I think, really acknowledge as Charlie pointed out, the role that leaders play, and also that, we've all had a huge increase in the level of stress that we faced in the last few years in our personal lives, right? And it's all one life, right? So that's also, we're feeling that in the workplace as well. And for leaders, that has really increased the nuance and the sophistication that we need to have, right? And now we are, under pressure to really manage the bottom line, while also really supporting people's, emotional needs, increasing demands in the workplace and expectations around that. And that's a big role for leaders. And that is part of the role as leaders now, but just really recognizing that has really elevated. And so getting leaders support to do that is a really worthwhile investment, because as Charlie pointed out, it has a huge impact on not only people's well-being, but really their experience at work and then organizational effectiveness as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll head on to the next question. What is the biggest stressor for employees at professional service firms, and how can you manage it?
Well, I'm assuming it's mostly professional services on here, hopefully others as well, but that would definitely be the tyranny of the billable hour. And many professional services firms were still working in this in this environment of billable hours, and many working towards more of a value-based model, but vast majority are still really working in that way. So there's absolutely that, combined with, that need to be bringing in work, right? You're bringing in work, you're delivering work, and then also really trying to be a great workplace and having the time to do all of the other important things that add to that overall employee value proposition. Learning is so important in professional services, right? For anyone, as an employee, that real desire to grow, as we said earlier, evolve. But in services, right, we are our knowledge, and then the connection points and the opportunities to contribute to different areas of the business in different ways. And so there's so many things, and we feel this at Humankind. We want to do it all, and the commercial realities are we still need to deliver our work. That's our business model, and we need to be there for our clients. So absolutely, that's the biggest stress, that tyranny of the billable hour, and really that constant pressure of bringing work in, delivering the work, and being able to really balance that with the pause and the other important aspects of employee value proposition. So, the biggest thing, and Charlie and I were just talking about this, boundaries are really important. You mentioned quiet quitting earlier, and there's a really important distinction. There's quiet quitting in the sense, firstly, of I'm starting to care a lot less, and therefore I'm going to put in less effort, and that level of care is also decreasing, and maybe my performance is decreasing. And then there's also a group of people that are really recognizing that they value things like their health and their family more than their work, and that's okay, and they're putting appropriate boundaries in place. And so it's really important. And as Charlie mentioned earlier, that can really be led from the top or made really explicit, either, verbally, or even better, really clearly through the actions and behaviors of leaders and at the organization.
Would you be able to go into a little bit more detail about what kind of boundaries people are setting, just to get that, to be able to balance their life and work together?
Yes, right. So what are the expectations around hours? Often in services, there will be clients that kind of expect you to be available exactly when you need them, right? But that can add up and that can compound, and services tends to be quite focused when you are there, right? And that rest and recovery is important. So really being able to set expectations with clients around when people are available. And then certainly, making sure whatever their arrangement is, if it's weekends and evenings, that, there's not that constant need to be on all the time. Yeah, and again, I think this can be modeled really well by leaders. I think that's one of the most effective ways. Holidays are another important period. Are you constantly messaging and online when you're on holiday, or are we modeling that we actually take a break? And of course, there can be a level of again, variation in there if there's an emergency or things like that. But for the most part, you enable people to take a break, or at least really clearly communicate, I'm doing this. I don't have the expectation that you'll do this, and I'm working on this for this reason. Other than that, I'll be, spending this time with my family or doing this hobby that's really important to me. So, yeah, so that would be an example. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. Thank you.
I think just to add to that, we had a really good discussion, KP and I, yesterday around actually sometimes boundaries are things that you need to talk about, note, and make very clear to say these are the boundaries that I'm working to. But sometimes there's those kind of culturally unsaid things that you experience, and boundaries that are just happening by the way in which you work. And I think organizations need to be thinking about, should I be intentionally calling out these boundaries so that it's very clear, or do they already exist and we just need to celebrate and recognize them? Because you don't have to call a boundary for it to be a boundary. And I think there needs to be thought around either being intentional or just letting the normal kind of day-to-day culture of an organization continue to exist, but recognizing it.
Fantastic. Yep, and with flexible working, right? And if you're working in different time zones, and there's all sorts of factors there, right? So I think the more variation you have, the more explicit it needs to be, because also, working at night for some people, that really works. That really enhances their work experience to be able to log off and then log back in. And you still have to be able to progress your work. But I think being really explicit around, the way that you're working and then your expectations of others. And of course, there's a way to, progress work without expecting an immediate response.
Okay, fantastic. I can see that we've already got a question here. So if you both are ready, we can move on to the Q&As. Okay, so we have a question here. What are your thoughts on actually having employees shut down and turn off communications during off hours? Do you support it or not?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. Again, we're working within a multifaceted system, right? I don't think it's binary, right? You need to, if we're talking about services here, you need to be able to meet client demands, and you need to be able to meet your operational rhythms, and people also need to be able to take that break and shut off. So the short answer is, yes, we do support that. And again, I think being really explicit. So that might be asking the team to really exercise their judgment. If you are under, a particular deadline that you're moving towards, communicate that. And it's like, hey, can you be available online this time, if we need you? But that's not the norm. The norm is that people can shut off. And again, right, we're talking about delivery of great outcomes versus hours and having to be on and available all the time. If people are coming in, doing really great work, meaningful work, expectations are really clear and explicit, and people are meeting those expectations, what more can we ask for? And we know that when people come back rested, then they're doing better work. They're more creative, they're more collaborative, they're more responsive.
Fantastic. Great. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to pop them through the Q&A section in Zoom. Just give it a minute for people to type out their questions. Cool, okay. I'm not quite sure if I understand this question, but maybe you both will.
I use a little bit more clarification. Someone just asked a question around what we follow for support. If you could just provide a bit more clarity on that, we'd love to dive into that afterwards.
Fantastic. We've got a couple more here. We've got a comment. I like that answer, that being contactable outside of standard working hours is the exception, not the norm. Smiley face. Cute. Next question is, what are your suggestions to industries that are desperately trying to retain staff, but are finding themselves in a situation where rival companies are trying to poach staff with promise of greater remuneration and not thinking of some of those other benefits that we've been talking about?
Yes, I'm happy to jump in. So I think it's really tough, right? I think there are always going to be individuals where remuneration is the primary driver for them, and that is going to be something that they will shift organisations through. However, I do think there's a huge portion of the workforce, and as Katie touched on earlier today, who actually are looking for deeper connection, and so looking for organisations that have values or a purpose that aligns with who they are as a person, organisations that have the flexibility or who have great ways of collaborating and sharing knowledge. So I think for me, if you have those benefits and you have a culture that you're really proud of and that for you think is a differentiator, then I think you should absolutely think about how you're developing that into something that you're selling to both your employees internally and to prospective employees. There's a lot of work done around creating your EVP and being really clear around why people should work for you and why people should stay for you. And I think it sounds like there is a piece of work for you and your team to do around, in addition to remuneration, why is it so awesome to be in this organization and how we communicate that to people.
Fantastic. Anything to add to that one, KP?
I think it was spot on.
Fantastic. So kind of building on that, we've got a question. I'm always keen for ideas on unusual benefits that can support the team that aren't big financial costs, maybe some untraditional things. Any suggestions?
Absolutely. So we'll kind of start with some general, and that being said, it really depends on your business, the culture that you want and need to support your business strategy, because those things should be really intrinsically linked, and all of those things. But and also like what really matters to your people. So this is where we go back to that, like speak to your people, listen to your people, and understand what would actually really make a meaningful difference to them. So some things could include at Humankind, our well-being benefit, for example, is we have flexibility in that. So everyone on our team receives a $1,000 annual benefit, and they're able to use that in whatever way they want, because it's right. So it's difficult to meet everyone's needs, and that really provides flexibility in that. Of course, we've touched on professional development and some learning, and we've talked about cost. So, it can even be internal sessions run by members of the team that have different areas of expertise, people in your networks that you can pull in and really draw. But also, the best way to learn is through experience. So the opportunity and being really deliberate and intentional about getting people interesting work, like one of the top impacts on your experience at work, get people interesting work, get to work with other members of the team, the opportunity to learn and reflect. Those are some real basics that don't really cost a lot. Also, again, like people want to, belong to something, and we have that innate human need. It's a survival need to be a part of a group. And so, that social connectedness, we see some awesome examples of people doing really interesting things, teams that the wider team breaks into small groups, and they each take turns putting on a lunch, and every 2 weeks there's a team lunch, and sometimes it's cooked together in a kitchen, and sometimes it's organized at a restaurant down the road. But it's awesome because the team comes together, they have that break, you have that connection, but also the smaller groups are working together. And I mean, especially if you're like cooking together and cleaning up together, there's a real like biological magic that happens in the energy there. Or you can do that, you can do similar things online as well. Charlie, what else?
I was trying to think, like for me, I was thinking social connectedness and that intentional time to pull together as a team. For example, we do monthly celebration teas where we sit and have cake and celebrate all the amazing stuff that's happened across the month. Can't come to mind kind of things like duvet days, or mental health days, so setting aside a 1, 2, 3, whatever it feels right, around dedicated days for people just to take time out to take some self-care and to switch off is one that we've seen, which is quite prevalent at the moment, particularly given the continued level of work and stress that people are having to absorb.
Yeah, I think even like touching on that professional and experiential learning, it's like doing interesting work and also having the opportunity to be involved in the business. Like we have such an opportunity to really teach our teams around the broader context of how an organization operates. And that's really powerful learning, and really having them involved because they add so much to, what we can do. And it also gives them the opportunity to learn and contribute on different strategic initiatives or really important cultural initiatives or business improvement projects. So that's a win-win for everyone. If anyone else in the call has any other great ideas, please add them in here for everyone. We would love to, and so would everyone else.
Absolutely. So Robert has said, he's clarified that he's asking if Humankind provides 24-hour support globally.
Yeah, so our team is based here in New Zealand, and we have team members. There's just under 35 of us now, and with varying kind of areas of expertise. So we have employment relations specialists, really strong people and culture practitioners, and we also have experienced designers. And a quick digression on that is part of our approach at Humankind is that we apply human-centered design to the work that we do. So all of what we know about UX and CX, really deeply starting with user research and designing and then testing and iterating, we do that in the people space. And so we have people that are experienced designers and human-centered designers and as their core area of expertise, but we all apply that to all of our work. So the reason I'm sharing that is we can absolutely help internationally. Employment relations, we're more centered in New Zealand, but much of the other work, then we can do that remotely with you.
Fantastic. That sounds great. If anyone else has any questions. I really love hearing about having meetings about retention and not just exit meetings, and learning what you should do to keep your employees. It's a nice comment.
That's cool. And it's so interesting because actually stay interviews is something we talk about quite regularly, particularly in the current market environment where organizations are really struggling with retention. And it's such a basic concept, really, if you think about it. We're all used to a standard exit interview of asking people what you could have done better at the point of exit. But actually, those stay interviews are so powerful and are definitely something that we're advocating for. And look, stay interviews don't need to be long-winded touch points where you sit down with an hour with individuals. They can look and feel really different across different organizations. But it's cool to hear that that resonates because we're particularly passionate about it, around staying connected to the team and understanding what's important to them.
Fantastic.
Charlie, I know you've thought a lot about this, and many members of our team have. What are like some of the key questions that people could be asking their teams?
Yeah. Particularly given we use our methodology around PrEP. So KP mentioned it earlier around purpose, relationship, enablement, and performance. Those are really the 4 categories that we start to ask questions around people's experiences. So kind of one, when you're thinking about purpose, is like, do you feel connected to us as an organization? What resonates, what doesn't? Relationship wise, it could be, do you feel well supported by your manager? What else could we be doing to make sure that you feel fully supported to be successful in your role? As an example, enablement, do you have the tools, the software, the hardware, that you need to be able to perform your role to the level that you need to? Kind of what are the other enabling factors? Do you have the systems that you need? Do you have the places that you need? And then finally performance, which is a huge one, because actually we find that through all of our conversations and discovery is that when people are uncertain around what's expected of them or how they grow in their role, it can lead to real discontentment. So questions we like to think around performance are, do you understand what's expected of you at our organisation? Do you know how you're tracking and receive regular feedback in terms of how you're performing? Do you understand what growth looks like for you in your role at our organisation, and what else could we be doing? And so I think using that prep model and structuring 1-2 questions around each of them can be really helpful in terms of understanding the full spectrum of experiences, not just performance, not just connection. So trying to understand kind of interaction experiences within each of those pillars, I think, is a really good start.
Yes, I was just thinking about a few of the other ones as you were sharing those ones. Some of the other favorites are around, is the experience what you expected it to be when you joined this organization? So much of our experience hinges on the expectations that we had of what it would be, of course, right? So that's a great one. Communications, right? That's a big job, big role of the leader. Do you feel that communication is open, clear, transparent? Do you have the information that you need? That's a really big one. Do you understand, how you're remunerated and what that looks like? Do you understand the future of this organization and the strategy that we have and the role that you play in it? Those are some key questions that again relate to the purpose, relationship, enabling, and performance experiences.
Fantastic. Okay, we've got time for one more question that's come through. How do you overcome asking for confidential feedback in surveys and the lack of engagement?
Charlie, I'm happy to start.
Yeah.
If that works. This is such a good question because it's really controversial. So the controversy is, do you gather confidential feedback or do you gather attributable feedback? And at Humankind, we use a system called Joyous, and it's attributable. And so instead of sending out a bulk survey, we send out pulse questions, but it is attributable. And so that opens a dialogue that we can have with the team. The argument against that is, will people be as open and honest? The argument for it, though, is that you can actually do something with it, right? Sharing feedback without putting a face or a name to it, it becomes really hard to action that. And definitely not in all cases, but in some cases we see that being less productive, and it's just a place that, complaints are coming in, but without being willing to engage or have the ability to engage in a really constructive conversation to understand more depth, which you need to after a survey, and then be able to action it. So would really encourage considering moving to a more attributable survey, and or really the quality comes in the conversation.
And I think I'd add to that, whether it's confidential or not, I think we always find, because we run a lot of surveys, is that the biggest part around successful engagement is often through communicating the why. So why are we doing this? What is the purpose? What are we hoping to achieve? And I think the more information you can provide around the need for someone to engage and provide the insights, the more likely you are to get that commitment and buy-in from people to set aside time to contribute. And so whenever you're going up for surveys, and we challenge ourselves regularly to make sure that we're doing this, are you communicating why? Have you created enough of a reason for people to participate? And what else could you be doing to continue to promote that in different ways, whether it be through leadership communications, whether it be through copies of your report, what's that look like?
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, we will begin to wrap this up. Thank you so much, KP and Charlie, for coming and spending the time to answer our questions today. I really appreciated hearing what you had to say, and I'm sure everyone else in the webinar did as well. There's some great tips in there, so thank you so much. All right, we'll let you go now, but thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining today. We've really appreciated having you all here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having
Oh.
us back.
Thanks so much. Bye.
And thanks, Ellie.